Not the polished PR version. Not the sanitized studio statements. Not the clipped little miscommunication tweets that popped up and disappeared in under 24 hours. No, I'm talking about the real moment. The one director Jason Orley tried to bury. The one the studio allegedly threatened staff over. The one that leaked anyway, because someone in that building decided the truth deserved to be seen. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And if you think you know Hollywood drama, trust me, you don't know this kind of drama. Because this wasn't just an argument, or a tense moment, or a diva attitude gone too far. This was a full-blown collision of ego, entitlement, and identity, the kind of clash that explodes only when two things mix. A star who demands to be called Duchess, and a co-star who absolutely refuses. But let's rewind. Picture this. A billion-dollar streaming studio in expansion mode. A prestige limited series greenlit faster than executives could finish their morning oat milk latte. A cast so stacked with award nominees, the press started calling it the next cultural earthquake. A director with a reputation for calm, order, and immaculate control. And then Meghan Markle, the actress who rebranded herself into American royalty. The performer who insisted every call sheet list her as Her Grace. The woman whose contract reportedly included a clause about status acknowledgement. The celebrity the internet couldn't stop talking about, even when it wanted to. And across from her, Lila Corbin, a rising star, a fan favorite, a down-to-earth, don't mess with me actress whose entire personality screams, I don't care who you think you are. Oil. Meet fire. Now here's where it gets good. On a Tuesday afternoon scene rehearsal, what should have been a simple, quiet character walkthrough, tension started building. A line here, a comment there, a subtle eye roll, a long exhale. You know the kind. The sort of on-set energy everyone feels, but no one names. Until someone finally does. A production assistant overheard the first spark. Lila, refusing, politely but firmly, to address Meghan Markle as Duchess Markle during a blocking discussion. Meghan froze. Not like she was offended. Not like she was surprised. No, more like she was stunned that someone had dared. What did you call me? She asked, with that slow, cool voice that usually precedes trouble. Lila didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She simply said, your name, Meghan. And that's when the air changed, like the whole studio inhaled at once. Here's where most actors would laugh it off. Play it cool. Diffuse the situation. But not Meghan Markle. Not the woman whose royal persona had become her armor. Not the actress who built an empire on the idea of being treated like nobility, even in a fictional script. Not the celebrity whose team insisted interviewers use honorifics during press tours. She stepped forward, just a few inches, but close enough that the crew later described the moment as electrified, uncomfortable, and dangerously quiet. That's when director Jason Orley intervened. Too softly, too late, and with way too much hesitation. Let's reset, he said, trying to keep the mood sterile. But nobody reset. Not really. Not emotionally. Not psychologically. And definitely not Meghan Markle. Because, and here's where everything flips, Meghan noticed the cameras. They weren't supposed to be rolling. It was rehearsal, but one lens light glowed. A tiny red dot. Someone hit record, and someone else didn't stop them. Was it an accident? A plant? A quiet attempt to document difficult behavior? A crew member doing what they were told? No one knows. Nobody agrees. Everyone has a theory. But the moment Meghan saw that light, the moment she realized there was a camera pointed directly at her during that tense standoff, something in her shifted. Her expression changed. Her posture changed. Even her voice changed, dropping into the performative, dramatic cadence she uses in high-stakes scenes. And then, the moment this entire story hinges on. A hand flicked upward. Sharp. Fast. Too fast for some to process in real time. A sound, quick, crisp, shocking, cut through the studio. A sound that half the crew insists they heard. A sound others swear was a prop falling. A sound the leaked footage would later make impossible to deny. But what happened next, immediately after that sound, was the part that the studio could not control, could not spin, and absolutely could not erase from the internet. Because Lila didn't step back. She stepped forward. And that's when the clip ends. Abruptly. Intentionally. cut at the most explosive moment possible. A cliffhanger built from real tension. A silence more terrifying than yelling. A scene that ends exactly where every viewer screams. What happened next? But here's the thing. That clip, that tiny fragment of chaos, that 5-second sliver of scandal, it's only the beginning. Because behind that half-minute leak lies a month-long powder keg. Secret feuds, contract disputes, status demands, staff walkouts, and one director who allegedly had a nervous breakdown trying to keep the production from collapsing. And you're about to hear all of it. Every confrontation, every whispered threat, every studio cover-up, every contradiction in the official statements, every reason this story became the most toxic rumor circulating inside Amazon Galaxy Studios. But the real question isn't what happened that day. It's who leaked it and why. And trust me, the answer is not who you think. And when you finally discover who hit upload on that clip, you'll understand why this scandal was never about a slap. It was about something far bigger, far darker, far more explosive. Something that, if true, could destroy more than just a show. It could destroy a career. It could destroy a reputation. It could destroy an entire studio. You ever feel like a story has layers you can't see yet? Like the first explosion is loud, but the aftershocks carry the real damage? That's exactly what happened here. Because the leaked clip, those few chaotic seconds that sent the internet spiraling, wasn't just a moment of on-set tension. It was the final match dropped onto a pile of secrets everyone tried to pretend wasn't there. But before we unravel those layers, before we expose the chain reaction that followed, let's zoom into the moment right after that sound echoed through the room. You know how people react when something unbelievable happens in front of them? Some gasp, some freeze, some pretend they didn't see anything, and some, like a few brave crew members in that studio, instinctively look around, searching for someone else to validate the insanity they just witnessed. That's what happened. Eyes darted, breaths halted, heartbeats thudded through rib cages like warning drums. One lighting technician later described the room as a bomb going off in absolute silence. Everyone felt the shock. No one dared move. Except Lila Corbin. Here's what makes this moment unforgettable. She didn't retreat. She didn't crumble. She didn't go wide-eyed or step back like a shaken extra in some soap opera brawl. She simply straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, met Meghan Vale's stare with a look that said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." But she didn't say a word, not one syllable. And that terrified everyone more than anything she could have screamed. Because silence, cold, steady, deliberate silence, carries power. And in that instant, Lila held every ounce of it. Meghan, on the other hand, her expression faltered, just slightly, but enough to reveal something the cameras weren't supposed to catch. Doubt. A flicker of what did I just do? But only for a millisecond. Then, snap, she was back in persona, back in control. Back in that cultivated aura of royal superiority she wore like a designer cloak. She glanced at Director Jason Orley, expecting him to intervene. But his face said everything. He had no idea how to fix this. That alone should have been the end of the rehearsal. Any sane director would have shut down production for the day, sent the actors home, held an emergency meeting, done something. But Jackson wasn't functioning like a director anymore. He was functioning like a man drowning. A man trying desperately to keep the studio executives happy. A man terrified of losing his job over an actress whose contract reportedly protected her like she was made of rare crystal. A man caught between two forces he couldn't control. And so, against all logic, all reason, all common workplace etiquette, he said, "Let's take 5 minutes. 5 minutes to process the most explosive moment of the entire production. 5 minutes to pretend nothing happened. 5 minutes to avoid addressing the raging wildfire that had just erupted on his set." It was laughable, pathetic, predictable, and worst of all, it didn't work. Because drama doesn't evaporate in 5 minutes. It metastasizes. Now here's where the story fractures, where two narratives start forming, each one more twisted than the last. Narrative 1. According to Meghan Vale's team, the moment was misinterpreted, a gesture taken out of context, an accidental movement blown out of proportion, a prop-related sound misidentified by gossip channels. In other words, we deny everything. But then there's narrative 2, the one whispered between crew members, The one passed in hushed voices during late-night wrap-ups. The one technicians murmured to each other while breaking down lighting rigs. Their version wasn't polished, wasn't sanitized, wasn't crafted by publicists with immaculate hair and crisis management degrees. Their version was raw, unfiltered, consistent. It happened, one grip said. We all saw it. A makeup artist insisted. Someone had to leak it, a boom operator whispered. And that's what changes everything. Because if it was truly nothing, if nothing happened, if the clip was really a misunderstanding, why did Amazon Galaxy Studios go into full lockdown mode within minutes? Why did phones get confiscated? Why did security escort certain staff off-site? Why were NDAs reissued like emergency evacuation notices? Why did the director vanish from social media for 3 weeks? And why did the studio try to get ahead of the story before the story even hit the internet? That's not normal. That's not standard protocol. That's panic. That's fear. That's damage control before the damage even becomes public. You're probably wondering the same question the crew whispered to each other that afternoon. What exactly was in that footage? Because the leaked version, the one the world saw for 5 glorious, shocking seconds, is nothing compared to what insiders claimed the full clip contained. Some say the uncut version shows the moments leading up to the confrontation. Others say the mic packs picked up dialogue that, if released, would end 3 careers on the spot. A few insist there were 2 angles. Not 1, 2. And one rumor, one persistent, terrifying rumor, suggests that the director himself kept a private copy. For protection. For insurance. For leverage. Now ask yourself this. If the footage was truly harmless, why would anyone need leverage? Why would a director need protection from his own lead actress? Why would a multi-billion-dollar studio scramble to shut down every leak channel within hours? Because they knew. They knew exactly what that footage showed. They knew exactly how bad it looked. They knew exactly how quickly it could destroy everything they built. And still, they underestimated the internet. Because someone inside that studio wanted the truth out. Someone wanted the world to see what really happened. Someone wanted to expose the dynamic that had been rotting this production from the inside. And they succeeded. But before we get to the leak, before we break down how the footage made it out of a locked-down, security-patrolled, NDA-obsessed studio, we need to go back. Back before the slap. Back before the tension. Back before the cameras rolled. To the moment this entire feud began. The first spark. The first insult. The first misunderstanding. Or maybe not a misunderstanding at all. That set 2 actresses on a collision course neither one could escape. Because if you think the slap was the beginning, you're dead wrong. It was the end of the beginning. And the true beginning. Oh, you're about to hear it. And trust me, what happened long before that rehearsal? What set these 2 women against each other? What turned a simple title dispute into a full-blown on-set detonation? That part of the story is far more shocking than the slap itself. And once you hear it, everything will make sense. You know the saying, there are 2 sides to every story. Introduction, Part 4, continuing toward 2,000 words. You ever watch 2 people perform a scene and realize they aren't acting anymore? Like the script is just background noise, and what's really happening is something personal, something raw. Something real? That's exactly what happened the following week. It was the first major emotional scene between their characters. A confrontation, ironically enough. 2 women in the story facing off over a secret betrayal. The kind of scene that demands tension, demands chemistry, demands vulnerability layered over anger. The kind of scene directors dream about, and actors secretly fear. But for Megan Vale and Lila Corbin, this wasn't a scene. It was a battleground. The script called for intensity, accusations, a long-held resentment erupting into a bitter dispute. But the moment the cameras started rolling, it became obvious this wasn't acting. Not even a little. Let's set the stage. A dimly lit study room set. 2 chairs. A polished desk between them. Soft amber lighting meant to highlight tear lines and trembling lips. The crew standing closer than usual. Not out of interest, but out of concern. The energy was that heavy. Lila stood on her mark, script absorbed, breath steady. She prepared like a professional, every movement grounded. Megan stood opposite her. Chin lifted, shoulders back, posture immaculate. But her eyes? Cold. Not character cold. Not method acting cold. Personal. The director called for action. At first, the scene played out fine. Dialogue flowed. Body language sharpened. Cameras caught every micro-expression. But then, halfway through the exchange, the script required one of them to say a line that would trigger an emotional breakdown. A line originally written for Lila. Except during rehearsal, during the Cold War that had been brewing all week, someone, and by someone, we mean Meghan Vale, had requested a line change. A subtle one, but devastating. The original line. You think the world owes you something. Harsh, but within the story. Meghan had it altered to. You think your title gives you power. A line that wasn't just sharp. It was personal. It was targeted. It was aimed straight at the real-life tension between them. Nobody on the crew missed the implication. Nobody brushed it off as coincidence. But Lila? She didn't flinch. Not yet. She delivered the line before it. Calm, steady, controlled. And the room leaned in, sensing a storm building. Meghan stepped closer. Her voice dropped. Not her character's voice. Her own. Cool. Threatening. Aristocratic in a way that had nothing to do with the script. And then she said the altered line. You think your title gives you power. The room froze. Everyone knew exactly what Meghan was doing. She wasn't playing the scene. She was attacking. On camera. In character. But not really in character at all. The director should have cut. He should have intervened. He should have shut down the take. But he didn't. He let it roll. Some say he knew the moment was gold. Raw. Real emotion that couldn't be faked. Others say he was too afraid to upset Meghan. Others say he secretly wanted the tension to fuel the performance. Whatever the reason, he stayed silent. And Lila, for the first time, showed a crack. Her breath stuttered. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes flashed with something sharp and unfiltered. She wasn't acting, either. She stepped closer, too, matching Meghan's stance, matching her intensity. And she whispered, barely audible, "Try me." The kind of line that sends shivers down a viewer's spine. The kind of line that wasn't in the script. And that's when things shifted in a way nobody expected. Meghan Vale reached out. Not aggressively. Not violently. But dismissively. She placed her fingertips under Lila's chin. A gesture both intimate and condescending. The kind of touch that says, I own this moment. I own this scene. And I own you. It wasn't directed. It wasn't choreographed. It wasn't professional. The crew collectively inhaled. One camera operator instinctively zoomed in. Another adjusted his focus, sensing something was about to break. Lila's eyes narrowed. Her body stiffened. Her breath went cold. And with a voice that carried enough heat to set the wallpaper on fire, she said, "Don't touch me again." Meghan didn't remove her hand. She pressed it harder. A power move. A dominance play. A statement disguised as performance. And that's when the director finally snapped out of whatever haze he had been in. Cut. But the damage was done. Lila stepped back. Her whole body trembling with restrained fury. Her hands balled into fists so tight her knuckles went white. She didn't yell. She didn't storm off. She didn't make a scene. She simply looked at the director and said, "We're done for today." Not a request. Not a suggestion. A decision. Meghan Vale scoffed. Rolled her eyes. Tossed her script onto the desk with an exaggerated sigh. If she can't handle a simple scene, she said loudly, maybe she's not ready for this level of work. That line, that single, dismissive, venom-laced sentence, was the spark that pushed the budding feud into open warfare. Crew members exchanged looks. Assistants buried their faces in their hands. Publicists started typing on their phones. And Lila? She didn't rise to the bait. She just turned her head, slowly, deliberately, and locked eyes with Meghan. And she said 7 words that changed everything. "This isn't about the scene, Meghan." The room fell into a silence thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew what she meant. Everyone felt the truth behind it. Everyone understood that this conflict had become personal, deeply personal, and dangerously uncontained. But what nobody knew yet was just how far it would escalate. Because this moment, this charged, electric, pressure cooker moment, was the true beginning of the meltdown, the starting point of the chaos, the opening chapter of a feud that would ripple through the entire production. And what happened afterward? The retaliation, the whispered threats, the strategic leaks, the director's meltdown, the studio's attempted cover-up. It all traces back to this moment, this scene, this shift, this spark, and what you're about to hear in the next part of the introduction. It's the turning point that ensured this feud would never be contained. Because the very next day, Something happened on set that made the slap inevitable. Something even the studio tried to erase. Something that would make even the leaked clip look tame. And that incident is where everything truly spiraled out of control. If you thought the line-touching moment was bad, the next day was the point of no return. Because there's a difference between tension and hostility, between discomfort and danger, between discomfort and danger, between two professionals having creative friction, and two women circling each other like predators trapped in the same cage. Day 7 of production was exactly that. It began quietly, too quietly. The kind of quiet that makes seasoned crew members exchange nervous glances. People weren't speaking above a whisper. Assistants were avoiding eye contact. Even the security guards at the studio entrance seemed unusually alert. Everyone felt it in the air. Everyone. And here's the strange part. The moment Meghan Markle walked onto the lot that morning, something was different. She wasn't wearing her usual meticulously curated smile. She wasn't gliding like she owned the place. She wasn't making dramatic entrances that forced everyone to turn and look. She was tense, her jaw stiff, her shoulders squared, her eyes sharp and assessing, as if she entered expecting an attack. It didn't take long to understand why. Because perched on a folding chair near stage B, sipping an iced matcha and chatting with a wardrobe assistant, was Lila Corbin, relaxed, focused, composed, and smiling. Crew members still talk about that smile. Not malicious, not mocking, just confident. That confidence, more than anything, rattled Meghan to her core. Because Meghan Markle thrived on being the center of gravity. She needed the room to orbit her. She needed the narrative to revolve around her status. But Lila's cool, unbothered presence shifted the gravitational field. People gravitated toward her now. Crew members approached her first. Extras clustered near her table. Not intentionally, not even consciously. They just felt safer there. And Meghan saw it. She felt it. She resented it. A top makeup artist later said, Meghan walked in expecting dominance. Instead, she walked into a room that already moved on from her drama. But wait, because this is where it gets wild. That morning, the call sheet included something Meghan Markle absolutely hated. A dual interview segment. For the studio's behind-the-scenes featurette. You know the type. Two actors sitting side by side, talking about their characters, discussing their dynamic, laughing together for promo fluff. Pure PR sugar. Except this wasn't sugar anymore. This was gasoline. The moment Meghan saw the schedule, she snapped at the assistant director. Fix it. But the AD, exhausted and drained from a week of chaos, simply said, the studio wants it. Both of you are required. Meghan's eyes narrowed. The AD visibly flinched. Lila walked over at that exact moment, timing that some swear was accidental, others swear was divine intervention. She glanced at the schedule, then at Meghan, and shrugged. It's fine. I can handle it. Those 5 words detonated the room. Not because they were disrespectful, not because they were provocative, but because they were true. Meghan Markle could not handle this interview. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it. Everyone braced for impact. And impact came fast. The dual interview was scheduled for 10:15 a.m. At 10:12 a.m., Meghan Markle walked onto the set. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, expression carved from ice. At 10:13 a.m., Lila arrived. Hair in soft waves, wearing a crisp white blouse and the calmest smile imaginable. At 10:14 a.m., the cameras began prepping. And at 10:15 a.m., the interview began. And this is where things started coming apart in ways nobody expected. On camera, in front of 2 producers, 3 publicists, and a crew of 8, Meghan Markle tried to reassert dominance. She interrupted. She talked over Lila. She inserted her title wherever possible. She corrected the interviewer twice. Once for forgetting to say her grace, and once for calling her Meghan instead of Dame Vale, an honorific she had not earned and had only recently started insisting on. Lila sat through all of this silently, gracefully, patiently. But then it happened. The interviewer asked a simple question. What has surprised each of you most about working together? Innocent, light, softball. Lila answered first. She said warmly, I didn't expect our dynamic to be so honest. Authentic conflict can lead to incredible on-screen chemistry. A professional, neutral, diplomatic answer. Then the interviewer turned to Meghan, and Meghan Markle leaned forward. Eyes narrowed, lips curled into a queenly smirk. and said, "I've been surprised by how untrained some people can be in understanding hierarchy." The room stopped breathing. The producer's eyes went wide. One of the publicists dropped her pen. A camera operator muttered, "Oh no, hierarchy." Lila understood the implication immediately. She didn't react right away, not externally, but her posture changed. She sat slightly straighter, slightly forward, slightly sharper, and she said a sentence that would echo through the studio halls for weeks. "Fortunately, real talent doesn't need hierarchy." Boom. A clapback so soft, so elegant, so lethal it might as well have been delivered with velvet gloves. The interview ended early. Publicists rushed the actresses off set in two separate directions. Producers pretended nothing happened. The director hid in his office. But the damage? Oh, it was irreversible. Because that line, Lila's line, spread through the set like wildfire. Crew members whispered it at lunch. Assistants repeated it in the hallways. Extras murmured it between takes. Makeup artists said it under their breath. Real talent doesn't need hierarchy. The quote became a quiet rebellion. And Meghan Markle felt every ounce of that shift. She stormed out of the studio for the rest of the day. Her team demanded schedule changes. Her publicist filed 2 formal grievances. Her manager threatened to pull her from the project. But none of that compared to what happened when she returned the next morning. Because when Meghan walked onto the lot, determined to regain control, determined to reassert dominance, she found something waiting for her. Something taped to her dressing room door. A single piece of paper. White. Plain. Unmarked except for one sentence written in black Sharpie. "A duchess without a kingdom is just a woman with demands." Some say it was a joke. Others say it was a warning. But Meghan saw it as an attack. She ripped it down, crumpled it, stormed into her trailer. And that moment, that tiny, symbolic slap in the face, was the moment she decided something had to change. Something drastic. Something physical. Something she could control. And the very next day, during rehearsal, that decision took form. In the moment that would later become the most infamous 5-second leak in modern Hollywood. The slap wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't heat of the moment. It wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of everything leading up to it. And the reason it exploded into a leaked clip? That reason is darker, messier, and more calculated than anyone guessed. But before the slap, before the leak, before the cover-up, one more event happened behind closed doors. A confrontation so intense the studio still denies it occurred. If you thought the dressing room note was the final warning shot, you're about to learn that the real turning point didn't happen in public. It didn't happen on camera. It didn't happen during rehearsal or in front of the crew. It happened in a locked conference room. Just 3 people present. Meghan Markle, Lila Corbin, and Director Jason Orley, sweating through his linen shirt like he'd been dropped into a pressure cooker. The meeting was called for clarity. That's what the official memo said. But everyone on set knew what it really was. A confrontation disguised as a conversation. A last-ditch attempt to stop a disaster before it swallowed the entire production. And let me tell you, this meeting set everything on fire. Here's how it unfolded. The closed-door collision. The door clicked shut. Lila sat calmly on one side of the table, posture relaxed, hands resting lightly in her lap. Meghan Markle entered with the slow precision of someone who wanted her entrance to feel like a royal decree. She sat down abruptly, not gracefully, not calmly, but like someone claiming territory. Director Jason Orley looked like he hadn't slept in days. He ran his hands through his hair, exhaled, and started. "Thank you both for coming. We need to reset expectations." Meghan arched one eyebrow. "Reset whose expectations?" Jackson swallowed. "This tension, it's affecting the production." Lila didn't speak. She simply watched, studied, measured every shift in the room. Meghan leaned forward. "Maybe if certain cast members understood basic respect." Lila cut in softly. "You mean the respect of calling you a title you invented for yourself?" Boom. Jackson flinched. Meghan's face hardened, her lips tightening into a line that could slice glass. "It's not invented. It's part of my public narrative." Lila tilted her head. "And the rest of us are supposed to pretend we're in your narrative with you?" Meghan slammed her palm on the table. The sound ricocheted across the small room. Jackson nearly jumped out of his chair. "Let's pause right here. Because crew members later confirmed something crucial. This was the first moment Meghan's anger crossed from vanity into volatility. Her voice sharpened. You don't get to talk down to me. I've earned where I am. Lila's reply was ice. Then why do you need a fake title to prove it? Silence. Thick. Charged. Electric. Meghan stood up. Not slowly. Not dramatically. She stood like a woman who was 1 second away from exploding. Jackson scrambled to intervene. Let's all calm down. No, Meghan snapped. She's been undermining me since day one. Lila finally leaned forward, her voice low, controlled, dangerous. I'm not undermining you. I just don't play pretend when it comes to hierarchy. Jackson tried again. Ladies, we're here to fix this. Meghan whirled on him. And you always take her side. There it was. The accusation. The crack. The unraveling. Jackson froze. Because in that moment, his fear wasn't about the show, or the budget, or the studio's expectations. His fear was standing 3 feet away from him, wearing designer heels, and a reputation sharp enough to end his career with one phone call. He took a breath. Meghan, no one is taking sides. She pressed a hand to her chest. You're allowing disrespect. Lila scoffed under her breath. Meghan spun back toward her. Say something, Lila. Say something without hiding behind that smug little smile. And then it happened. The moment the crew later described as the real beginning of the end. Lila leaned forward, eyes steady, voice calm enough to feel like a threat. Respect is earned, not demanded. You could cut the air with a knife. Meghan's eyes flickered. Rage, humiliation, disbelief, all crashing into each other at once. And then her voice dropped dangerously low. If you embarrass me again, I swear. Lila didn't let her finish. You'll what? Silence. Meghan didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how to say the threat out loud without crossing a line she couldn't hide from. Jackson saw it. He knew exactly what was happening. He stood abruptly. We're done. Meeting over. Everyone cool off. Meghan didn't move. She just stared at Lila. Not acting. Not posing. Not performing. This was personal. Deeply personal. The kind of personal that doesn't disappear. The kind that festers. Evolves. Mutates. And that's why the next part matters. Because the second the door opened, 2 PAs waiting outside heard it. A final line from Meghan Vale. Spoken under her breath. But dripping with such venom that they repeated it to half the crew within an hour. She said, she's going to regret this. That was the moment everyone knew. The slap wasn't going to be a surprise. It wasn't going to be an accident. It wasn't a split-second loss of control. It was inevitable. The collision course was set. And the next day, the day of the rehearsal, the cameras rolling, the red recording light blinking, the sound heard across the studio, was the explosion everyone could feel coming. Everyone except the one person who should have been most prepared. Lila Corbin. Because while she walked onto the set determined to stay professional, Meghan Vale walked on with a decision already made. A decision that would lead not only to the slap, but to the leak, the cover-up, the fallout, and the truth someone risked everything to expose. And that truth is so much darker than a slap, so much deeper than a feud, so much bigger than 2 actresses fighting on set. But that journey begins with the explosion. And now that you know everything leading up to it, everything simmering beneath the surface, everything boiling in silence, you're ready for chapter 1. Well, in this case, there are 6, and each one contradicts the last. But before we dive into who said what, who lied about what, and who tried to bury which version, we need to travel back to day 1 of production, because that's where the real fracture formed. Not during the slap, not during the rehearsal, not during the leak. It all began the moment Meghan Vale and Lila Corbin met for the very first time. And that moment, oh, it wasn't pretty. Imagine it. A polished conference room at Amazon Galaxy Studios. A massive oval table. 3 dozen scripts stacked like they were sacred texts. Producers, assistants, publicists, and executives milling around, shaking hands, whispering introductions. And then, doors swing open. In walks Meghan Vale. Graceful, poised, regal in a way that felt like she was auditioning for a role only she believed she held in real life. She didn't greet the room. She didn't nod. She didn't smile politely like the rest of the cast. She simply glided to her chair. And here's the detail every single person remembers. On her script cover, printed in large, elegant, serif font, was the title. Her Grace, Meghan Vale. Not her character name. Not her real name. Not her stage name. Just Her Grace. One assistant later said, "It felt like we were starting a medieval court drama instead of a modern streaming series." Everyone noticed. Everyone felt the shift, but nobody said a word. Then, 10 minutes late, the door opened again, and in walked Lila Corbin. Completely opposite energy. Coffee in hand, hair in a messy bun, jacket half on, half off, laughing at something a PA had just said. She tossed her bag down, plopped into the chair next to Meghan, and said, "Sorry I'm late. Traffic is insane." Friendly, warm, human. Meghan Vale didn't turn her head, didn't move a muscle, didn't acknowledge her at all. Lila didn't notice at first. She started flipping open her script, taking a sip of coffee, settling in. But then, as the room grew quiet, she finally looked sideways and saw it. The massive, pompous, ego-drenched script title staring back at her. Her Grace, Meghan Vale. Lila blinked once, twice, then laughed softly, thinking it was some kind of inside joke. "Oh, cute," she said. "Props department trying something new for the fantasy genre?" Meghan Vale finally turned. Slow, deliberate, like a queen regarding a peasant who had spoken out of turn. She said 4 words. "That is my title. Not my preference. Not my credit. Not my branding. My title." And right there, right in that tiny, seemingly insignificant moment, the fuse was lit. Because Lila Corbin did not smile, did not apologize, did not fawn. She just raised an eyebrow and replied, "Okay, Meghan, and if looks could kill?" Production would have ended before it even began. Now here's the part almost nobody outside the studio knows. 2 hours later, before the first table read even finished, Meghan Vale's publicist marched to the production office with a written complaint. Not about pay, not about scheduling, not about script revisions. No, the complaint read, "Lead actress Lila Corbin failed to acknowledge the professional title personally requested and contractually defined by Miss Vale." Contractually defined. Let that sink in. A clause, in writing, in her contract, demanding everyone refer to her as Her Grace. Producers panicked. Assistant directors panicked. Legal panicked. But the worst reaction came from Director Jason Orley. He didn't panic. He folded. He called an emergency etiquette briefing. Yes, an actual meeting, with actual adults, in a professional studio, to discuss how to address one actress's preferred artificial royal title. Some crew members thought it was satire. Others thought it was performance art. A few wondered if they were being filmed for a hidden camera show. Lila Corbin? She sat through the meeting completely silent. Composed. Expressionless. Until the end. When the floor opened for questions, she raised her hand politely. Everyone held their breath. She leaned forward and asked, calm as ice, "So are we expected to use this title when addressing her off-camera?" The room stiffened. The director swallowed. Meghan Vale smiled. And before anyone else could speak, Meghan answered herself. Yes. Not a suggestion. Not a hope. Not a preference. A command. Lila's jaw didn't drop. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't show shock or offense or outrage. She just said, "No." One word. Sharp. Decisive. Non-negotiable. You could feel the tension crackle through the room. Some people later described the moment as the start of a Cold War. Others said it felt like 2 storms meeting over open water. One PA wrote in their journal, "We all felt it. We all knew we had just witnessed the beginning of something catastrophic." Because behind the polite smiles, behind the industry etiquette, behind the contract language, 2 truths were clear. Meghan Vale believed the world owed her reverence, and Lila Corbin believed no one was above basic respect. Those 2 beliefs could not coexist. Not in a studio, not on a set, not in a cast, not under bright lights and daily rehearsals. Conflict was inevitable. Collision was guaranteed. And that first spark, that script cover, that title, that refusal, became the foundation of a feud that would explode into the most infamous leaked clip of the decade. But the true fire didn't start that day. It started the next week. During a scene so emotionally charged, even the script supervisor later said, "I could feel the air changing before anything actually happened." A scene that would turn simmering tension into outright hostility. A scene both women interpreted differently. A scene the director mishandled in a way that still haunts him. A scene that, if you look closely, contains the very first physical gesture that hinted at what was coming. And that scene. You ever walk into a room and immediately know, instantly, viscerally, that something is about to go horribly wrong? You've seen the 5-second clip. You've heard the whispers. You know the slap happened. But what you don't know, what the world never saw, is what happened in the 5 seconds right after. 5 seconds that every crew member remembers with uncomfortable clarity. 5 seconds that the studio fought to bury. 5 seconds that turned a workplace meltdown into a full-blown Hollywood scandal. Let's slow it down. Let's zoom in. Because those moments are where everything changes. Right after the slap, the silence no one forgets. When Meghan Vale's hand connected, the set didn't erupt into chaos. It didn't explode with screaming. It didn't even fill with gasps. Instead, the world went quiet. Too quiet. A suffocating, frozen, horrifying quiet. The kind of quiet you get when people witness something they never expected to see and have no idea how to respond. A lighting tech later said, "It wasn't normal silence. It was shock silence, like the air got sucked out of the room." Another crew member said, "It felt like time stopped. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion." But in the middle of that silence, one person did move. Lila Corbin. Not backward. Not away. Not toward safety. She stepped forward. Slow. Controlled. Deliberate. Her face didn't contort. Her expression didn't crumble. She didn't burst into tears or retreat or shout. She simply leaned in, locked eyes with Meghan Vale, and said, in a voice calm enough to terrify, "Are you done?" A sound technician swears the temperature in the room dropped. Meghan Vale, already trembling with adrenaline, wasn't expecting that response. She flinched, not from fear, from being challenged. For the first time all morning, her confidence cracked. Just a fracture, but visible. Lila didn't break eye contact. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't touch Meghan. She didn't move aggressively. She just stood her ground. And that, more than the slap itself, sent ripples through everyone watching. Because Meghan Vale was used to reactions. Shock, deference, retreat, apologies. But Lila's reaction? Unshakable restraint. And restraint is sometimes more powerful than retaliation. Meghan's response, a whisper the mic pack picked up. Here's the part the world didn't hear. Immediately after the slap, in that fraction of a second when Lila stepped forward, Meghan whispered something. A whisper meant only for Lila. But her mic pack caught it, recorded it, preserved it. The studio tried desperately to scrub it from all internal audio files. But multiple crew members confirmed it. She whispered, "You will never forget who you're talking to. Think about that. Not, 'I'm sorry.' Not, 'It was the scene.' Not, 'I lost control.' But a threat, a declaration, a power assertion dripping with entitlement." And Lila's response? Not fear, not shock. Just this. "I already have." If the slap was the spark, those whispered words were the explosion. The director's breakdown, live on camera. Director Jason Orley had been frozen the entire time, caught between two actresses. If the slap was the explosion, what happened next was the fallout. Fast, messy, panicked, and completely out of control. Because when Meghan Vale disappeared into her trailer, doors slamming, blinds snapping shut, security scrambling, everyone on that set realized something terrifying. This wasn't just an on-set incident. This was a studio-level emergency. And that's exactly when Amazon Galaxy Studios made its first mistake. Its biggest mistake. The mistake that ultimately caused the leak. Let's walk through what happened step by step. Because it's more twisted than the clip itself. The aftermath begins, and the studio panics. The director stood in the middle of stage, like someone had unplugged his soul. White as paper. Breathing uneven. Hands shaking. A boom operator muttered, "He's having a panic attack." He was. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Because in the Hollywood hierarchy, when a star hits someone on camera, there are only 3 possible outcomes. Studio cover-up, actor meltdown, legal nightmare. And the director was trapped in the center of all 3. Lila Corbin stood a few feet away, not crying, not shaking, not making a scene, just standing, still, centered, cold. Her calm was more unnerving than any meltdown would have been. One PA whispered, "She looks like she's choosing her next move." She was. But before she could take a step, before she could say another word, studio executives stormed onto the set. 3 of them, clutching tablets, phones, clipboards, and fear. Real fear. Not the pretend kind studios use for drama. The kind that comes when millions of dollars are on the line, and one actress's ego has just detonated a shooting schedule. The executive intervention. The lead executive, a man named Harold Dent, approached Lila first. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask if she needed medical attention or a moment to breathe. He asked, "Did anyone film that?" Silence. That silence told him everything he needed to know. He ran a hand through his thinning hair and muttered, "God help us." Then he snapped orders like a general on a battlefield. "No one leaves this set. All cameras. Hand them over. All cards. Pull them. All footage. Confiscate it. All personal phones. Turned off now." That's when everything shifted. Everyone realized something. The studio wasn't trying to understand the situation. They were trying to control it. And fast. Two assistants approached the main camera operator. "Give us the card," one demanded. He hesitated. Not long. Just a fraction of a second. But that hesitation was everything. Because it revealed the truth. He knew what he had in his hands. He knew how bad it was. He knew what it meant. And someone else noticed his hesitation. A second camera operator. A grip. A lighting tech. A production assistant. Eyes widened. Whispers began. And that's when the first spark of rebellion formed. Lila's first move. While chaos spread across the set, Lila Corbin didn't shout. Didn't argue. Didn't plead. She simply walked toward the director. Slowly. Deliberately. Like she was approaching a man with answers. "Jackson," she said quietly, "you need to report this." His eyes darted around like a trapped animal. Lila, I can't. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because they'll blame me. I let her spiral. I let it happen." Lila shook her head once. "Jackson," she hit an actor. "You didn't do that." He swallowed. "That's not how the studio will see it." And there it was. The truth behind the entire mess. The director wasn't afraid of Meghan. He was afraid of Amazon Galaxy Studios. Because they weren't interested in accountability. They were interested in optics. Money. Public image. Narrative control. Not justice. And Lila saw that clearly. The executives turned on Lila. Harold Dent approached them, tight smile plastered on his face. "Lila, sweetheart," he said, "why don't we take a walk to the conference room?" A trap. A classic studio tactic. Get the problem alone. Manage her. Convince her to be quiet. Spin it into a misunderstanding. Lila didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere until someone acknowledges what happened." Harold's smile tightened. "We're acknowledging it internally. The public doesn't need to know about every rehearsal hiccup." "Hiccup," Lila repeated. "Your lead hit me." Harold raised both palms. "Let's not make this bigger than it is." That line. That dismissive little line. It sliced through the room. A camera assistant whispered, "Oh, they're going to bury this." Another muttered, "They're siding with Meghan." A third said, "They always do. She's the brand." And Lila knew it. She felt it. The moment she refused to call Meghan her grace. The studio had quietly chosen sides. And Lila wasn't on their side. Security steps in. What happened next horrified everyone. Harold nodded toward the two studio security officers hovering by the wall. "Escort Ms. Corbin to stage D. We'll debrief with her separately." Separately. Away from witnesses. Away from cameras. Away from anyone who could confirm what happened. Lila's eyes narrowed. "You're removing me from the set?" "It's standard procedure during incidents," Harold lied smoothly. A makeup artist whispered. "No, it isn't." A grip muttered. "This is bad." Lila took a single step back. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. She saw the trap. She saw the angle. She saw the strategy. And she refused to walk into it. "I'm not going anywhere until Meghan apologizes." Harold's face flushed an angry shade of crimson. "You are obstructing our crisis management protocol." Lila's voice dropped into a tone like sharpened glass. "And you are obstructing the truth." The entire room froze. Everyone knew what came next. A standoff. One that the studio assumed they would win. They didn't realize someone behind them was watching everything. Recording everything. Listening closely. And making up their mind. The decision that caused the leak. While the executives cornered Lila and security closed in, a young production assistant named Mara Jensen stood by the sound cart. She wasn't important. Not senior. Not influential. Just a background presence. Unnoticed, underestimated, invisible. But she had something the executives didn't know existed. A copy. The moment the camera operator hesitated earlier, Mara understood something. If the studio got their hands on the footage, it would disappear forever. No accountability, no justice, no truth, just a rewritten narrative, a miscommunication, a tension-filled rehearsal, a moment taken out of context. So while the executives barked orders, and Lila stood her ground, and Meghan hid in her trailer, Mara quietly slid the backup audio file onto her own flash drive. A simple drag and drop, a decision made in 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would cost her career. 3 seconds that would expose the truth. 3 seconds that would make her the mysterious whistleblower the internet would later call the ghost of Stage C. And that decision happened before the crew even realized one question. What happened inside Meghan Vale's trailer? In those 10 minutes, she locked herself inside. That made this messy moment turn into a full-blown war? Because yes, the slap was bad, but what she did after was much, much worse. A studio's expectations and his own unraveling sanity. But Lila's response jolted him awake. He stumbled forward, eyes wide, voice cracking. Cut, cut, cut. His shout echoed through the set. Too loud, too panicked, too shaken to sound like a man in control. Cameras stopped. Boom mics lowered. Every pair of eyes darted toward him. But Jackson wasn't speaking to the crew. He was speaking to himself. We're done. We're done. We're done. Shut it down. A tense beat. Then utter chaos. People scattered. Assistants rushed in opposite directions. Security stepped forward instinctively. Someone began crying. Nobody ever identified who. But Meghan Vale? She didn't move. She stood rooted to the spot, chest rising and falling rapidly, staring at Lila like she couldn't process what she had just done. Meanwhile, Lila turned to the director, voice steady. She hit me. We're not done until that's acknowledged. Jackson looked physically ill. He rubbed his forehead. He shook his head over and over, muttering, "This can't be happening." But it had happened. In front of cameras. In front of witnesses. In front of the entire core crew. And one crucial detail. One camera didn't stop rolling. Not because the operator forgot. Not because of malfunction. Because he was too stunned to move. That camera captured the uncut moment. That's the footage the studio tried to bury. That's the footage the leaker got hold of. And that's the footage, if ever released, that would destroy Meghan Vale's career permanently. The first words from the crew. People think the crew immediately took Lila's side. Not true. In the first 30 seconds after the slap, nobody took anyone's side. They were too shocked, too overwhelmed, too terrified of losing their jobs. One grip said later, "We all just froze. No one knew what the hell to do. It didn't feel real." But then something shifted. One makeup artist stepped forward, hands shaking, voice trembling, and said, "Are you okay?" She meant Lila, not Meghan. And that tiny moment, that single question, was when the loyalty of the set changed. Meghan Vale saw it. She felt it. She hated it. Her eyes narrowed. Her breathing sharpened. Her hands curled into fists, not to strike again, but to control her shaking. Because for years, she had commanded obedience. But in that moment, she stood alone. And Lila, without raising her voice or playing to the room, simply said, "Yes, I'm fine." Then she added, "But this doesn't get brushed under a rug." A murmur rippled through the crew. Not loud, not dramatic, just the soft, collective realization that something irreversible had happened. The clash no one saw on camera. The leaked footage stops at the moment Lila steps forward. But what happened next, in the seconds after the camera cut, is what sent the studio into panic mode. Meghan broke the silence. "You provoked me." Lila's laughter, soft, disbelieving, cut through the room like a blade. By existing, Meghan stepped forward again. Lila didn't move. Security tensed. The director shouted, "Stand down." But nobody knew who he was screaming at. And then Lila dropped the line that sealed the feud forever. "You're terrified of me. That's the problem." The room exhaled as if someone had punched the air out. Meghan's expression twisted, and she said the line that would later be quoted in every anonymous crew interview. "I am above you." Not metaphorically. She meant status. She meant entitlement. She meant hierarchy. She meant title. She meant all of it. Lila answered, "Then why did you hit me?" And that question, is what broke Meghan Vale. Not physically, not visibly, but internally, because there was no answer she could give. No excuse that wouldn't sound pathetic. No justification that wouldn't expose her ego. So instead of answering, she fled, walked off set, stormed through the lot, disappeared into her trailer, slammed the door so hard the windows shook. And that's when the crew collectively understood. This wasn't going away. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a heated moment. This wasn't fixable. Something enormous had just happened. Something that would escalate in ways none of them could predict. Something that would leak. Because someone knew the world deserved to see it. And that leak didn't happen at random. It didn't happen out of spite. It didn't happen because of fandoms or gossip blogs. It happened because of what came immediately after the slap. In the next few minutes, when the studio tried to shut everyone up, and one crew member made a life-changing decision. That decision is the real heart of this scandal. Not because of a sound, not because of a warning, but because the air itself feels charged, like someone shook a bottle of soda and twisted the cap halfway open. That's exactly what the crew felt the morning of the slap. No announcement, no dramatic music, no screaming, just a feeling, a pressure, low and heavy, crawling under the skin of every person on stage C. Most people ignored it at first. They had work to do, shots to set up, props to place, lighting rigs to adjust, schedules to follow. But no amount of professionalism can hide the truth. Everyone knew. Everyone. Something was coming. And the person who seemed to feel it most, the one who stepped onto that set like she had personally detonated something and was now waiting for the smoke, was Meghan Markle. But let's not jump ahead just yet. Because to understand this moment, you need to zoom in on where the morning actually started. The makeup trailer. The makeup trailer meltdown. Makeup artist Tara Nolan, one of the steadiest, calmest, most unshakable people on the entire crew, would later say, "I knew immediately. The second she sat in my chair, I knew we were in for war." Why? Because Meghan Markle didn't speak. Not a hello. Not a good morning. Not even her usual, her grace requests warmer lights today. She just sat, rigid, silent, eyes dark and simmering under heavy lashes. Tara tried to keep things light. Got some dramatic scenes today? Want the usual cooling mist? Nothing. No nod. No blink. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Tara glanced up at the assistant standing near the door. The assistant shook her head so subtly it barely qualified as a gesture. Not the "she's tired" kind of head shake. Not the "bad commute" kind. The "she's dangerous today" one. So Tara did what professionals do in the presence of danger. She worked quietly, carefully, fast. Halfway through applying foundation, Meghan finally spoke. One sentence, sharp as a razor, dropped like a blade onto a cutting board. "Is she here yet?" Tara didn't need clarification. There was only one she. "Lila?" she asked cautiously. Meghan's eyes lifted, slowly, predatorily. "You know exactly who I mean." Then she looked straight ahead again. Now Tara wasn't shaken easily, but she felt something in her stomach twist at those words. It wasn't the tone. It wasn't the anger. It was the certainty. As if Meghan Markle had walked into the trailer already rehearsing the moment she planned to create. As if she knew. Not guessed, not wondered, not feared. Knew. Today was the day it would explode. A different kind of energy. While Meghan radiated silent fury, Lila Corbin walked onto the lot with a different kind of energy entirely. Focused. Determined. Clear. One PA described her like this. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't avoiding anything. She walked like she had a job to do, and she wasn't going to let anyone push her off center. But even Lila, calm as she appeared, wasn't immune to the atmosphere. She felt the tension. She felt the shift. She felt the way people whispered her name a little too softly when she passed. She saw the way the studio execs, who usually ignored the set until there was a premiere, were suddenly hovering near monitors like vultures sensing a dying animal. She noticed how staff avoided meeting her eyes. Not out of disrespect, out of fear, not of her, but for her. Because people who spent their careers on film sets knew that when an actress like Meghan Markle came in seething, unstable, tightly wound, something was going to happen. And Lila Corbin was standing directly in the blast radius. The final warning. At 9:52 a.m., exactly 8 minutes before rehearsal was scheduled to begin, Director Jason Orley approached Lila outside stage C. He didn't look good. Not sick. Not tired. He looked haunted, like he had seen the future and wanted to stop it, but couldn't figure out how. Can we talk? He asked. Lila set her script down gently on a crate. What's wrong? He glanced around, checking for producers, security guards, assistants, anyone who might overhear. Then he said something no director should ever have to say to an actor. Just don't provoke her today. Please. Lila blinked slowly. Her expression didn't harden, didn't soften, didn't shift. She simply asked, what did she say? Jackson shook his head. It's not what she said. It's how she walked in. She's on edge. Badly. Just keep your distance until we get the scene done. Lila didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She didn't promise anything. She just picked up her script and answered. I don't provoke her, Jackson. She provokes herself. He exhaled, long, defeated, and walked away, entering the set. At 10 a.m. sharp, Lila stepped onto stage C. The set was dressed for a confrontation scene. Glass windows, cold lighting, a minimalist design meant to emphasize emotional tension. People pretended to work. They moved props, adjusted lights, pretended to check cables. But nobody fooled anyone. They weren't working. They were bracing. At 10:02 a.m., someone whispered, she's coming. And the room changed. Like oxygen thinning at high altitude. Like a pressure drop before a storm. Like the air grew too heavy to breathe. Then, heels clicked against the concrete floor. Slow. Even. Controllable. Meghan Vale entered. Script in hand.